All right, looks like we should be live. Welcome in. If you are new here, my name is Dr. Matt. I'm one of the most experienced MCAT tutors and med school admissions coaches in the country. Welcome in. Tonight, we will be on for a little bit to answer your questions and answers to answer your questions about getting into med school, studying for the MCAT, prerequisites, applications, and all of that fun stuff. You can drop your questions here in the comments, and also, of course, let me know where each of you is along the med journey, i.e., and I know I should probably do this as a poll, but hey, are you a pre-med, a med student, already applied, etc., etc., etc. So let me know where you guys are on the journey. If you're not yet a pre-med and you're thinking about it, that is fun. Also, Karina says just took a practice exam today, got a 494. I have my MCAT scheduled in a month. Should I reschedule? Okay, so Karina, I get this question all the time, and my super not nuanced answer is, unless there is a reason why you think that your score went lower than the other practice exams that you've taken, then usually it is best. Now, if you're there's a whole lot of nuanced questions that I usually get into with people. The nuance includes things like, are you a retaker? Do you have other practice exams? How long have you been studying? And then I have, for students who work with me on like planning out their studying, I have like 25 other questions that I ask about how you're studying, what resources, and things like that. So feel free to drop any other questions that you have kind of related to that or follow up related to that. You could always drop me a line at matt@mcatboss.com, or just fill out the form at mcatboss.com as well. And I'm happy to set up a session or something for you. But the general answer is that you can expect, in most cases, to score plus or minus a few percentile points within the range of where your last couple of practice exams have landed. And so if you're in a score range where, your goal was to score like in the 490s, then obviously that would be okay, since most, applicants are aiming for 500s, 510, something of that nature. Then yeah, scoring in the 490s would definitely be a good indication that you want to give it some more time. And it's a great idea to reconsider changing how you've approached this. I think one of the biggest issues that students run into is there's very sort of unfortunate reality that a lot of students who have taken the MCAT once and not been happy with their score don't have a clear enough picture of what they do want to keep and what they don't want to keep about their previous study habits. And so what ends up happening is, Baron, drop a question, man. What ends up happening is they end up retaking the test like 3, 4, 5 times in a row. I've had a student, believe it or not, who found me after he had taken the exam 5 times. And so, I got super serious with him and helped him develop a really serious remediation plan to get ready for his 6th MCAT, and he worked really hard at it, and he is a med student now, so he got himself into a really, really excellent med school. Baron, yeah, drop a question, man. Megan says, how do you recommend starting to study for the MCAT as someone who has no idea where to start? Okay, so Megan, really fantastic question. Where to begin? And in fact, I think let me record my rant on this, because I have something to say. So where to begin on your MCAT studies? It feels like an almost impossible, insane mountain of a climb to pull off studying for what is one of the world's hardest entrance exams. There's a couple things you need to know. It's not going to be overnight. The best students' results usually come from studying for a few months, and you're going to split the practice exams. Here's what I mean. You want to take a practice exam in your first week of studying for it. Look over a little bit of the content, take a practice exam, be horrified, and live with the horror of how insane it is to take a full day exam over that many topics and then let that be the fire under you to actually work through a question bank. And do not look at another practice exam for a few months while you work on those question banks. Okay. That's the way you need to get started studying for the MCAT. If you need more help, reach out at mcatboss.com. All right. Just my little 60-second rant on that, because that is a very, I'll have to post it later, but that is a great question. It feels intense, right? It's like stepping in front of a fire hydrant and being like, what does it feel like to get, a water cannon, right? So Baron says, I had a really rough freshman year, 2.4 GPA, feel really behind. How do I recover? Okay. So the 1 semester the 1 year when you go sort of where you have the chance to get away with a low GPA is that first semester or two. Any other time than that, and then it really truly can impact like staying caught in a like 2 point something range can be, it's not that it's impossible, but the numbers are not pretty, right? Like there's a tiny percentage of students. So like if 100 students apply in who have like a 2 point, say mid 2.0 GPA, then you're looking at probably like 90, depending on the MCAT score, probably like 90 something percent of that will not make it in, and probably the majority of them are not going to even get an interview invite. So the best thing to do is obviously figure out what went wrong, and then if it's anything from like took too many courses and got behind, if it's I had a sick family member, if it's I had way too much fun, any of those reasons can be really valid reasons to any of those reasons can be really valid reasons to end up on in introspection lane. And that's kind of what I would say start with introspection, figure out what you need to switch up to get a better GPA. And then you're really, truly going to want to put in like 4.0 as much as you can, even if it means taking less courses, even if it means actually going and taking less courses per hour and taking an extra year or two. So something to think about. Yo says, would you do MD again or PA school? For me, I would say that I'm a person who really, really enjoys figuring stuff out on a really, really sort of nuts and bolts level. Like I really want to understand how the system is working, what is going on. And I like to be in a decision-making role. And for me, I don't think that there's quite enough of that in the PA route, but I think that for people who are going to be practicing primary care, want to have a very 9 to 5 schedule or 9 to 4 schedule, and, really find that mid-level provider role appealing. I think PA is a really wonderful option. I think the fact that it is more, I was going to say it's more accessible, but I have to be very cautious when I say that about PA, because there's a very big misunderstanding that people think that PA school is more accessible in terms of its acceptance rate. And in reality, PA school is more accessible in terms of not having to take the MCAT, if that's kind of the main thing you're thinking about. But in terms of your GPA and your probability of getting in on one cycle, it is actually harder to get into PA school than MD school. And I mean, well, why not, right? Like you're getting paid almost as much, essentially as much as some physicians make. And you have almost as much sort of practice ability, at least for general practitioner reasons, and maybe with a little bit more oversight. But it's a pretty awesome route, and so understandably, it is very popular. Applications to PA school are very, very popular, and so not too many people. The acceptance rates are not great. That's the main thing I'll say. A lot of applicants, not a lot of spots. Next one says, how much is the minimum to get into med schools all over? Okay, minimum GPA all over the country and the MCAT. So generally speaking, we can't say that there is a minimum in terms of like automatic rejection from all schools, because for the most part, there is somebody who's been able to get in at some point with some score. It's just that the numbers are precipitously lower when you drop into, say, the 2s on the GPA. Numbers are precipitously lower when you drop into the 490s on the MCAT. As Senator, I did not mean to skip your question. Let me scroll back up. Hang on. Okay, so Senator asked, are poster presentations still good when compared to a publication? So in my opinion, the hard part about the really hard part about papers is that you just cannot tell from papers how much a particular participant actually put the effort into that paper, right? So you can't tell whether somebody wrote half the paper or if they just kind of like filled out the table on page 3. And so it should at least be acknowledged that if somebody's a middle author or a late author on a paper, there's a very real chance that they didn't significantly contribute directly to the construction and interpretation and the production of the data and interpretation of the data on a paper. And so I think that for that reason, because posters oftentimes are very involved, they should be recognized. Now, I just don't know that anybody has the data comparing like what happens if you have 3 papers and 2 posters versus 4 papers and 1 poster. I don't think anybody has the resolution on it that granular to tell you like how does that affect your acceptance rates, or if you're a med student doing it, how does that affect your residency rates? So Brian says, I'm having trouble getting A's in my STEM courses. I've taken 6 STEM courses, 4 B's, 2 A's. Okay, so the sort of same thing, Brian. If you're taking too many of the harder STEM courses, especially with hard professors, I think we're in a weird transition point also because a lot of professors are not entirely sure how to deal with the fact that it's harder now to do like out of class assignments without people using LLMs. And so the evaluations can be a little bit more challenging. I think you really, really have to figure out why you're not getting the grades. And so I'll kind of make the general remark just because for everybody here, I'm happy to, if you want to schedule a session and actually talk in more detail about like what is going on, please do feel free to drop me a line. Just mcatboss.com, just drop me a line. Let me know that you're Brian from the live stream. But, the general thing is, if the score fall off in one of your STEM courses is coming from something that is a sort of, for lack of a better term, like an assistable category, like laboratories, right? You can befriend or pay some other student in your school to walk you through, hey, you're an upperclassman. How did you do this course? Can I pay you, X amount per hour to sit with me and show me how to properly do a laborative? If it's something more than that, if it's like your homework isn't really setting you up right for the test and you're not sure how to like carry that performance forward on the test, this is a real problem that we're seeing more with students, because the LLMs often that are used as sort of like virtual tutors for practice problem help oftentimes spit out the solution too easily, and then the students don't actually train on how to answer those same problems when they're on an exam, or the practice problems they do on the LLM don't match the style of the problem that the professor is using on the exam. And so that can create a very sort of imbalanced experience there for the students. All right, thank you guys. Smash that like button. Thank you guys for all the questions. Let me catch up here. As a person who is going to start college this fall, what is the average GPA for pre-med? Okay, so the main thing I would tell you is if you're trying to get into the point, get your GPA to the point where it's not going to like take away from your application, trying to get it up above like a 3.6 is usually a good idea. If you can get it closer to that 4.0, it's great. But essentially, once you start getting below a 3.59, you end up in this bracket where because of your GPA, you have to score an absurdly high MCAT score. And that's, you don't want to be in a situation where you have to, you want to do it, right? You want to get a great MCAT score. I had a 3.82 GPA, so it wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. But then I scored close to 100th percentile in the MCAT because I worked really hard at it. And it's part of why I became an MCAT tutor. But you really can open doors with both, but don't let that GPA fall below a 3.6 if you can avoid it. Okay. Next one says, if I'm going to make prerequisites, what do you think about online fast-paced courses with online labs? I don't think that is a really good question. I don't think most of the medical schools actually consider online labs to be labs at all. So very good question, but be really careful to actually check on that before you go and invest a portion of your degree. Because even if you get credit for it from college, that does not mean it meets prerequisites for medical school. So that is a hugely important question to figure out before like going and doing all your STEM courses online. Guys, thank you for all the questions. A few of you take a little moment and smash it like. Let's get this out as many people as we can. Sander says, thanks for sure. Go says, I'm doing EMT, got a 50% first quiz. Any tips? The main thing is whenever you are on an exam of any kind, anything from EMT all the way to board exams, and you find that there's a disconnect between how you're prepping and how the exam asks, you need to go back to the drawing board and be like, how is this exam structured? Do more practice problems that are like the exam. This is one of the reasons why. So I teach the MCAT. MCATboss.com. I'm the founder of MCATboss.com. I've helped tons of students score crazy high scores on the MCAT, but I'm mean about it, right? Like I'm nice as a tutor, but I am very, very, very forward about telling students, I will teach you how to analyze the goodness out of your performance, but then I expect you to pivot around and actually work on the things that we found are your weaknesses. And too often students don't do that. They just make the same mistakes again, and you don't want to do that. BLOI says, how much time needed to study for the MCAT to graduate from? Okay. So I'm not sure what the end of the question meant. Are you asking me like how to get into like a California state school? Feel free to follow up on that question. I'm not sure where you're going with that. Let me see. As a person who's going to start college, okay, so we got to that one. Let's see. Okay, so somebody says 8 hours daily if your goal is 5-10. So it really depends. The amount of time to study for the MCAT really depends. In fact, I'm going to record this as a rant, guys. Stick with me for like 3 seconds while it does a countdown. So how many hours per day should you be studying for the MCAT if you want to score well? This question depends completely on two things. How long do you have before your test date? Like, are you taking it in a few weeks versus a few months? And how much can you retain in one day? If you are tired because you worked out or whatever, and you come in and then you sit there at a desk for 10 hours, but you're not productive, you've wasted your time. If you are taking it really, really soon, you might have to sit there 10 hours a day. But ideally, the best scenario is plan when you have time to study between 3 and 6 hours a day, and when you have like 3 to 6 months. If you can bust this out, this is for most students enough time to do enough methodical, careful practice to actually do really well on the MCAT. If you need more help, MCATboss.com. See you there. All right. Thanks, guys. So really good question. It really does depend, right? Because I have students who contact me and they're like, hey, man, make me a really intense schedule and then push me really hard. We want to meet 3 hours a day, and then I'm going to study 7 hours a day after our 3-hour session. And then we're going to meet every single day for like 3 weeks, and then I'm going to take it. Now, that's not typically what I recommend, but for most of my students, I'm like, hey, if you give like 3 to 6 months, I can make you for most people, like I can make them a beast at this test. Because it's enough time for you to absorb the material, get good at it, practice it, and execute it on a test. Next one says, I have a 2.9 SGPA and a 3.3 GPA, bio major, about to be a junior, have to work full time. Okay. That is a tough situation. There's definitely a tough situation whenever you have to work and study. It is a tough situation. I have had that same scenario, having to work to like pay your way through school and stuff. And it's harder. And when you get out the other side and you're, whether you're gunning a 3.3 or a 3.5 or a 3.8 or whatever in your GPA, you realize that you were able to pull it off while working. And one of the important things that you need to do, you need to keep this in mind, is when you apply, you need to mention that, because a lot of the people who are applying have this experience where like they didn't have to do any work, right? Like their way was paid and they didn't have to do anything else. It was literally just that. It was just studying, right? All right. And we're going to keep going a few more minutes here. I'll try to stay another 10 minutes or something if I can, so I can get through all your questions. I'm going to, let me make sure that I update this on the screen so that you guys know. So MCATboss.com, and I do a pretty chunky one-time discount if anybody books the same day or within like half a day or whatever, as a live. So if you are interested in working together, please do drop a line so that there is time for me to get you a little sheet out, or you can take a look at some of the options on there. All right, let's keep going. Next one, guys, thank you so much for all the questions. Tap that like button for me. Very cool. How many days? Let's see. I work as a okay, path assistant. Very cool. Okay, so you're gonna have some good medicine adjacent experiences with your job there. Frankie says, would you when you pass, will you donate your body to medicine? Why or why not? That is a really complicated question. That is definitely a super interesting topic. I think that's outside the scope for tonight, but that's a really interesting topic. Next one says, I'm about to graduate from Cal. Am I cooked? Oh, okay. So I definitely was missing that part of the. I definitely was missing that part of the question before. 3.0 is doable, but you're going to want to have a super high MCAT score. I'm happy to answer more questions. You might want to jump on a session with me, but yeah, you're gonna. Even if you're graduating from like Harvard University, graduating with a 3 is super borderline on that, like on that point where like, even if you score like a 514, 515, where like most students would get in at a bunch of schools, it borders that sort of part of the admissions curve where you're really close to, just being that like lower quartile for admission. So you definitely want to knock it out of the park on the MCAT. All right. Next one says, are pre-PA recs lower than pre-med? They are pretty similar. They're not that different. Next one says, I want to get tutoring for MCAT. Okay, yeah, just drop me a line, MCATboss.com. You can check out the website if you want to see more about my qualifications. I've been teaching this for like 13 years, scored close to 100th percentile, 200th percentile sections. I have literally consulted for some of the biggest MCAT companies in the country and been their like national lead MCAT expert. I have written practice MCATs and practice MCAT explanations for companies, a whole lot of stuff. But yeah, if you want to get directly in touch with me, you can book directly at MCATboss.com. You can also just email Matt at MCATboss.com, and I can set you up with a nice, awesome discount if you do same-day booking. Next one says, okay. Microbiome 3.0. Should I even try? I'm definitely not saying not to try. Let me get to the bottom of the question list, and I will open up a chart, and we'll actually talk through some of the numbers. We can totally talk through some of the numbers. Guys, thanks for hitting the like. Make sure you are following if you haven't already. Sarah says, do you think 6 months starting now is enough time to study for the MCAT while taking 18 units in the fall? Okay, 18 units is a lot. That is a lot of credit hours. If you are able to continue to study and get in a good solid 2 to 3 hours per day, there is a very real possibility that you can still make it happen. It really depends on what pace you end up hitting. If you're executing, so my technique is called the ladder technique. It basically involves like breaking down every single problem that you do one at a time, figuring out what drives your points loss, and then either improving the skill or developing an additional technique or fixing a content gap to go with that. And if you're doing that effectively and you're able to do it in less than 2 or 3 hours a day, and you can actually do that consistently every single day, or like 5 to 6 days a week, then yeah, I think that is possible. But again, 18 hours can be quite a lot though. So Anthony says applied to 30 schools, 3.92 and 508. Okay, everybody's gonna want to know What was the result? Okay. So we don't know results yet. Yeah, definitely let us know. The GPA is obviously, top tier. 508 is strong. I would be shocked if you did not get a number of interview invites, unless there's some like absolutely massive things like that's just something that is alarming on your application, which does happen, right? Like we get students who are periodically, we'll get students who are like, have horror stories of scoring in the 520s and like don't get any interview invites. And then we find out later that they got, caught for cheating on a test in med school and that they, were like, I don't know, intoxicated during a final exam or some crazy, terrible thing. And those students have a really hard time going anywhere. That can be really rough. Dylan says, I got diagnosed with ADHD halfway through uni, and thank you guys for following. Sorry, Dylan, I dropped that one. Now I only get A's. Is that trend enough? Yeah, I think that if you have a reason, if you have a diagnosis, and before and after that diagnosis, there's a really substantial pivot and your performance all of a sudden is jumped up, I think you have a really awesome chance of being able to explain it really well. I would say, whether it's me or somebody else, get somebody like me who has read hundreds of med school admissions personal statement essays and make sure that there are components that you need to be conveying about your academic competence and about overcoming difficulty. And you need to work that and weave that into your narrative so that you come across as this super strong applicant. Again, drop me a line, matt@mcatboss.com, and we can talk more about it. Next one says, how do you feel about pathology? I'm an incoming freshman into undergrad and I'm considering it. Now, are you talking about pathology as an undergrad course? Are you talking about it as as a medical specialty? Feel free to follow up because let me know where you're going with the question. Anthony says, I feel like my MCAT is low. 508 is not low. 508 is, and rather than waiting till the end of the stream to open up the MCAT GPA grid, we are going to go ahead and open up our MCAT GPA grid. For those of you guys who have not seen this before, if you Google MCAT GPA grid, you can open up AAMC has released to the public actual applicant and matriculant data that explains what the percentage. It's not technically a percentage probability. It is just a percentage as a proportion of students who have those grades who got in. And so according to them, the grade, so if you have a 3.0 or greater and you score a 506 to 509, there's a 52% matriculation, 52% acceptance rate. And so what that means is that 52% of the students who had your score bracket did get in. Now, it doesn't tell you how many of the schools got into. It doesn't tell you, did they get accepted to 90% of them? Did they get rejected from 90% of them and get accepted to 10%? It doesn't tell us. But that is a totally admissible number. 52% obviously is like a coin flip, but keep in mind the national acceptance rate is about 42%, so it's better than average. Felix says, what's a good MCAT score? So that is where it's like, it really truly is all over the map, right? You want to be above average, right? Average is 500. The perfect score would be like a 528. And the majority of students, the vast majority of students, like 99% of students, do not score above a 521 or 522. So the really interesting range is that 500 to like 520 mark. And where you land there can mean, like, if you're scoring a 504, you might mostly get into DO schools. If you're scoring the 508 to 510, you're probably, if you apply broadly, going to get into some, you might get into some MD schools. And if you score like, say, a 510 to 515, then you can be a little bit more picky where you go. And if you score a 515 and above, then you can start applying to the reach schools. And if you score in the 520s, you can apply to the Ivy Leagues, right? All right. Next one says, let me see. DSP position, a good PCE requires passing master residence. Next one says, thanks. Next one says, How much is like a 3-month prep? Yeah. So drop me a line. I always reply. Even if I'm streaming late, I always apply like same night, just cause I do a massive discount when people, book same day. But there's a bunch of different options. Cause, for some people, they're wanting to basically do a burst of hours and then study on their own for a few months. Other people, they want to do like an hour or two almost every single day. It's completely like all over the map how people like to do it, but I will follow up with you. If you can drop me an email, let me also, cause I think it's probably obvious. Obviously the website is mcatboss.com, but if you do need to reach out to me for help, or you want to jump on that discount, it's just matt@mcatboss.com. If you want to email me directly. All right. Next one says, yeah. And same thing for Mimi, just the exact same thing, right? matt@mcatboss.com. And I will always write back same night. If you don't hear from me, by the way, it means there's a typo in your email address. I have had probably like, I think I've probably at this with however many inquiries, few hundred inquiries from this year so far, this calendar year, I think I have probably had at least like 10 to 12 of you guys who have not just said you're going to email me, but actually emailed me, but then had a typo like on your contact form. And then when I email, it's like, there's no such email address. And if you don't hear from me, drop me a second message, double check that you're typing everything right. Next one says, what basis do you get into residencies? Okay, good question. It's a combination of your step exam score. So when you're passing boards, and letters of recommendation and comments that people make as you go through your clinical training. It's a whole bunch of things. And then of course you have essays and you have interviews. It's an extremely involved, very, very involved process. All right. Next one says, and we're frozen. Are we frozen? Okay. No, we're good. Next one says, Bailey says, I have a colonoscopy. Okay. We don't do any kind of, actual medical procedure questions. Thank you so much and best of luck. But that is a provider specific question. Princess says, is it too late to apply and get into this cycle if you're taking an August MCAT? Okay. Now, there are people who do this, guys. This is like a faux pas in like the world of Reddit to do an application in July or in June even, or July, and then to take your MCAT in August, because then it comes out in September. And the main thing I would convey to people is, if that is something that you're going to do, please try to knock it out of the park. Like, knock that exam out of the park. Make it so that if they look at your application, they're like, man, I know we've given away 80 out of 120 seats already, but in that final 40 seats, like, this is a person who really has what it takes. If you're not doing that, then it's probably better to just go ahead and prep really hard until the winter time. Give yourself several months and then take it in like December or January or something and apply the following year. But yeah, put in your best effort. If you need help sort of practicing in high speed for the next few weeks while you're doing that, again, drop a line, matt@mcatboss.com. Next one says, what are the chances of getting into anesthesiology residency? Okay, well, there's not a like blanket answer that I would be able to give on the, like, what are the chances, right? Like, cause it's a conditional probability. It depends on who's applying. What did they write? How did the doctors they worked with discuss working with them? Did they have a good attitude? Did the doctors write that this student showed up on time and was really reliable and is going to make a great future anesthesiologist? There's a bunch of stuff, right? Did you score in the bottom 3 percentile on your shelf and your step exams, or did you score in the top percentiles, right? Your shelf exams generally don't matter a whole heck of a lot for the other specialties that you're not going into if you do okay on them. But if you do really well and you do honors level grades, like really nearly perfect on the specialty you want to go into, that makes a difference too, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that they take into account. Yep says, should I go to dental school instead? Is it easier? That is a good question. I have some opinions about like PA school being easier and faster than MD school. I don't have a whole lot of opinions about dental school. My understanding is that because it is already a little bit more subspecialized than medicine, that the general breadth of learning that you have to do for med school is probably more intense. Now, There's a pretty big difference though. If you want to become a dentist and you're wanting to get into school and get out and do, dental procedures all day, then that is a sort of very different career trajectory than going to med school and learning about the entire body from head to toe and then specializing in doing a residency or something else, right? But yeah, that's med school is definitely it's like a mile deep, but it's also like 10 miles wide, right? All right, next one says, how many students have you worked with and what are the score range in med schools they get into? So I'm one of the most experienced MCAT tutors in the country. I know I say that a lot, but it really is true. Like a lot of MCAT tutors are in one of two camps, right? They're either like technical tutors. So they're like academic tutors. They're like, I'm a physics professor and I do this because I like teaching physics. And they way overteach the topic at a level that doesn't help students go fast and get high scores through the test. Or they're like pre-meds who are about to apply, or med students who are like, they just took the MCAT last year. And so they're not very experienced teachers. It is extremely rare to have, and I know this because I have been in this space for a very long time and I've actually worked for several different MCAT companies. It is very, very rare to have somebody who has actually not only aced the MCAT, self-taught, right? I self-taught my way to close to 100th percentile score, who has written practice material. So I know the material inside and out. I have taught the entire AMC content packet from front to back. I have written study guides. I have actually helped write practice exams. So I know the actual way that test writers write wrong answers. And so one of my ways of helping students out is I'm like, you know what, if people are paying me good money to tutor them, I'm going to give them here's the peek inside the test writer's mind. They think you're going to think that they're talking about this, and this is how they're going to trick you. And so I teach students to read past and read into the actual test. And then I teach them how to actually break down when they're missing it because they truly don't understand the science versus when they really do understand the science and they're being tricked by the test writers themselves. And so yeah, that's it. I've had countless students work with me anywhere from a session all the way up to bursts of 3 to 6 sessions and then go off and study on their own and do fantastic, all the way to students who've done 100 hours with me, right? Where they're meeting with me for an hour a day for 3 months. And I have had I don't even know, I think I'm probably responsible for a few 100 minimum students who are either med students or already doctors because I've been doing this for a really long time. And I've had a bunch of students land in the 5 teens and quite a few students land in the 520s. And of course, there's a lot of grit and self-determination and actually taking my advice and buckling down and working hours a day and doing the hard work for that. So Gemma says, what advice would you give to an undergrad pre-med student who's having a hard time with chem and bio? So I can only give general advice unless you're for this particular topic. This is one where I really truly, having the limited knowledge that I have without being on a session, this is the general advice is you need to figure out if you're doing poorly across the board, if you're doing poorly because there's a drop off between doing really well on homework, but then doing really poorly on the exam, and then figure out how to bridge that. Because there, especially in the sort of post LLM era, there are more and more students who are making 98, 99, 100% on all of their take home assignments, and then making a 45% on their exams. And because the LLM, the way that they're using it is to help them sprint to the answers instead of to challenge them to figure out on their own. It unfortunately means that a lot of students' test taking skills have gone the way of the dinosaurs. It's really, really, really bad. So you want to figure that out. And I'm happy to sort of, if you need to jump on a session, let me know and I'm happy to get into more details. All right, guys, we are going to wrap up here in a couple minutes and then I will check my inbox and get back to everybody who has written. Camden says, I'm a current pre-med student at community college about to transfer to bachelor's in public health. Is that smart? Yeah, I'm a fan of people doing their undergrad at least partly in local community colleges. I don't think it's a bad idea. I did that myself and I got interview invites at almost every school I applied to, and I got multiple acceptances and scholarship offer and everything. So I don't think it's a problem. I do think I don't know, maybe for like a couple of like super uppity schools, they might care. But again, if you're acing the MCAT and you go in with good grades, I don't think it matters. Somebody asked about Inspira. I don't have any opinion about that. Next one says, I'm going to start taking pre-med rec and going to take me 2 years. I'm still finishing my bachelor's. Bachelor's is full syllabus class and I'll be taking 2 science. Yeah. So if the question is just like, is it reasonable? Is it too many? Courses? I'm not sure exactly how many credit hours that would add up to. So I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure where you might have been going with that, but please do feel free to clarify or drop me any other questions related to that. All right. Okay. That said, I'm going to stay on for just a minute or two longer to see if any other questions drop in. Otherwise, we will go ahead and wrap it up there. But I can stay up to like maybe 4 or 5 more minutes if anybody has any other questions. Otherwise, I will go ahead and wind it down there. And let me go ahead and wind down on the YouTube side because we are at the bottom.